so today we're going to look at factoring, but before we do that, I want to kind of review what we did yesterday with our exponents and our polynomials. So I want you to take a few minutes. Oh, and I see that I wrote 2 twice here. So take a few minutes and work these 3 problems for me. So that's 9x to the third, that's a 3, sorry, y to the 5th, all of that raised to the negative 2nd power, negative 6x squared, y to the 4th, and then I've got 4x plus 1, all of that cubed, and then I've got x squared plus x minus a 6 times x squared minus 2x plus a 1. Simplify this for me. Okay, so before I do anything, I want to go ahead. This is something raised to the negative 2. So this would be 1 over 9x to the third, y to the 5th, all of that squared. And then this will be times negative 6x squared y, all of that to the 4th power. So this will be 9 squared, which is a 81. X to the 3 times 2, which is a 6, and y to the 5 times 2, which is a 10. All right, let's look at this. So this will now be negative 6 raised to the 4th power. So when you put this in the calculator, make sure you put a negative around or a parentheses around your negative there. So this will be a negative 6 raised to the 4th power, which is going to be a 1296. And then x to the 2, so that'll be 2 times 4, which is an 8, and then y to the 4th. Okay, so 1296, x to the 8th, y to the 4th, basically over 81, x to the 6th, y to the 10th. So I'm going to subtract my exponents, and I'm also going to then divide. So 1296 divided by 81 gives you 16. And then this will be x to the 8 minus a 6, y to the 4 minus a 10. So this will be 16x squared, y to the negative 6. So we'll then move the negative 6 to the bottom. So y to the positive 6 down there. Okay. So 4x plus 1, all of that cubed. So that means 4x plus 1 times 4x plus a 1 times 4x plus a 1. Okay, so we need to multiply this one, these 2 here, so 4x times 4x gives me a 16x squared. 4x times 1 gives me a 4x. 1 times 4x is a 4x. And 1 times 1 gives you a 1. Simplify a little bit, and so you'll get 16x squared plus an 8x plus a 1. Okay, so 16x squared times a 4, so that's a 64x to the third. 16x squared plus a 1 is a 16x squared. 8x times 4 is a 32x squared. 8x times a 1 is an 8x plus a 4x plus a 1. Combine your like terms, so you'll have 64x cubed, 16x squared plus a 32x squared, so that is a 48x squared. 8x plus 4x is a 12x plus a 1. Okay. All right, and then this one, so we'll have x squared times x squared, which is an x to the 4th. X squared times 2, a negative 2x is a negative 2x cubed. X squared times 1 is an x squared. Negative 6 times x squared is a negative 6x squared. Negative 6 times a negative 2x is a positive 12x. And then negative 6 times a 1 is a negative 6. So we'll have x to the 4th minus a 2x cubed minus a 5x squared plus a 12x minus a 6. Good deal? All right, so now we're just going to brush up, review our factoring. Factoring is the reverse of multiplication. So with our factoring, remember we have all of our rules. We have the first thing that you look for is a GCF, greatest common factor. Okay, then the second thing is you look at how many terms you have. So how many terms do you have? Okay, if you have 2 terms, there's 3 things that it can be. The difference of squares, do you remember that one? Difference of squares. So x squared minus a y squared, okay, will factor to x minus y times x plus a y. So the first term has to be a square, the second term has to be a perfect square, and then there has to be a minus sign in between them. Okay, and then we have a sum of cubes. Let's talk about squares. So what's that? 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, and 100. Those are our squares that we're used to. What about the cubes? 1, 8, 27, 64, 125, 216, 343, 5, 12, so on. So this one is a 2 cubed, this one's a 3 cubed, this one's a 4 cubed, this one's a 5 cubed, 6 cubed, 7 cubed, 8 cubed. Okay, so the sum of cubes is, if we've got cubes, okay, so first term is a cube, second term is a cube, and it's separated by a plus sign. Then it'll be one of those, so x plus y. And then we'll square, opposite sign, product, plus sign, and square. Okay, it could also be the difference of cubes. So cubes can be both sum and difference. Okay, difference of squares has to only be a difference of square. If it's a plus sign right there, it can't go any further. So difference of cubes would mean x cubed minus a y cubed. So this would be one of them, so x minus a y, squared, opposite sign, product, plus square. Okay. All right, then it could be 3 terms. And that's your trinomials. So you could have a trinomial that's just an x squared plus bx plus a c. Or you could have an ax squared plus a bx plus a c here. Okay, so remember this will be, you ask yourself what multiplies together to give you C and adds together to give you that B. And this one, you ask yourself what multiplies together to give you to be AC and adds to be to B. Okay, this is the one where you do the dividing inside there. Okay, so we got 2 terms, we got 3 terms, and then 4 terms you do by grouping. So that means you would group your first 2 terms, group your second two terms and factor. And then what's inside this parentheses should be identical. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to just put some problems up there and I just want you to factor as best as you can. So if I had 24x to the fourth minus 54y cubed. Okay? So let's look for, first term is look for the greatest common factor. So, is there a greatest common factor between 24 and 54? 6 can go into both of those, and I've got an x to the fourth. I meant to put an x right here, I'm sorry. So, x to the fourth and x to the third right there. So, there are 3 x's in common. So, your greatest common factor would be 6x cubed. When you take it out, then you will have a 4x minus a 9 there. Can I go any further inside here? No. So we are done with that one. Okay, so let's look at this one. So, is there a greatest common factor here between x cubed and a 25? No greatest common factor. Is my first term a perfect cubed? And it is. Is my second term a perfect cubed? And it is. So this is really x cubed plus a 5 cubed. This is going to be the sum of 2 cubes. So remember, it's going to be one of them. So x plus a 5. And then it's going to be squared, opposite, product, plus squared. So then the opposite sign of plus is a minus. The product of 5 times an x, always a plus sign, and then a 5 squared. So the factored version is going to be x plus a 5 times x squared minus a 5x plus a 25. Okay, what about this one? We've got 16x to the fourth minus a 1 here. So 16x to the fourth minus a 1. So my first term, or can I factor anything out? Is there a greatest common factor? Nope. What about 16x to the fourth? Is that a perfect square? Okay, and it is, so that would be 4x squared, all of that squared. And what about 1? And 1 is a perfect square. So this will be 4x squared minus a 1 times 4x squared plus a 1. Okay, what about this one? I've got x squared plus a 9. Is there a greatest common factor? Can I factor anything out? No. My first term is a perfect square. My second term is a perfect square. But what do I have in between there? A plus sign. So can I factor this one? Is there a sum of 2 squares? And there's not. So this one is prime. It can't be factored anymore. Okay, so y'all try to do this one for me. X cubed minus a 343. My first, I can't factor, there's nothing in common here. My first term is a perfect cube. I have a minus in between there. 343 is 7 cubed there. So this will be a 7 cubed. So this will be an x minus a 7, and then it'll be squared, opposite, product, plus squared. So squared, so it'll be an x squared. There's a minus sign here, so it's the opposite sign, so it'll be a plus. The product of these two, which is a 7x, always a plus, and then a 7 squared. So this will be an x minus a 7. Times x squared plus 7x plus a 49. Okay, so what about this one? Is there a greatest common factor? No greatest common factor. I have 3 terms. So I'm going to ask myself what multiplies together to give me negative 30 and adds together to give me negative 13. So that's what, negative 15 times a 2, negative 15 plus a 2 there. So this will be x minus a 15 times x plus a 2. Okay, what about this one? Is there a greatest common factor? No greatest common factor. I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got a trinomial, so, and I've got a number in front, so I do need to multiply. So this is going to be x squared minus 13x minus 2 times 7 is a 14. So now I've got to ask myself what multiplies together to give me negative 14 and adds together to give me a negative 13. Okay, which is what? A negative 14 times 1. So this will be an x minus a 14 and times an x plus a 1 divided by 2 divided by 2. So this will be x minus a 7, and then you'll bring the 2x plus 1 up. Okay, what about this one? Is there a greatest common factor here? No greatest common factor. There's 3 terms here, so what multiplies together to give me negative 20 and adds together to give me a negative 1. So that's negative 5 times 4. So let's look at this. This is an x to the 4. So that's going to be an x squared and an x squared. Okay, and it's going to be a negative 5 and a plus of 4. Can I go any further? And no. Okay, so, is there a greatest common factor here? There's no greatest common factor. How many terms do I have? I have 4. So that means I'm going to group 1 and group 2. Out of the first grouping, what can I factor out? It's an x squared. So I'll be left with x plus a 7. And out of the second grouping, I have a minus right there. So this is going to change that to a plus when I factor this out. So what's the greatest common factor here? It's a 5. So this will be x plus a 7. X plus a 7s are in common, so this will be x plus 7 factored out. And in your second parentheses, you'll be left with your x squared minus a 5. Okay, so let's do one more, and then I'm going to let you go ahead and work on your homework. So negative 6x squared minus 14x minus 4. So is there a greatest common factor? There is a greatest common factor of a negative 2. So when I have a negative 2, I will be left with a 3x squared minus plus a 7x plus a 2. Okay? Now I want to factor completely, so I'm going to go right here and I'm going to try to factor this trinomial inside there. So I've got 3 times 2, which is an x squared plus 7x plus a 6. So what multiplies together to give you 6 and adds together to give you a 1, which is a 6 and a 1. Divide both by 3 here, so this is going to be x plus a 2 and then 3x plus a 1. You factored out a negative 2 in the beginning, so now you have factored completely. Okay? So, we've done factoring now in Algebra 1 and in Algebra 2 and now again in Algebra 3. So this should all be a refresher for you, so you should be able to finish your homework probably in class today and get it checked already. Alright, if you need any questions, let me know. Y'all have a great day.